If, like me, your tools are in a bit of a mess, because let's face it, with the hassles and stresses of day-to-day life, it's the last thing on your mind to properly organise them, you might find today's video useful, because after 10 years, I finally got round to sorting out my tool store. Turning it from this to this, and in so doing, putting in place a system that I intend to stick to for the rest of my days. Now, this cellar has basically become a refuge for everything I care about after a few too many burglaries over the years. And you're probably thinking, as someone who does a lot of YouTube videos, that I live in a perfectly organised world. Well, I've got news for you. I don't, or certainly didn't, until lockdown gave me a bit of an opportunity to think about how I could better organise my tools. And it really was embarrassing down here. Whichever way you looked, you couldn't move, with my tools as a result spilling into the house, much to the annoyance of my wife. I've got to say, this job was not top of my list of priorities. These sort of things never are they? So with a couple of days decent weather forecast, I set about dismantling everything in this room and decamping the whole lot outside into the garden. A lot of this stuff I've hoarded over the years because I haven't been able to find a proper home for it, or I just felt I might need it, and I know full well when I remove all this and go through the proper systematic process of sorting through it to work out what to bring back down here, half of it will end up in the skip. But if you don't have a job process like this, you never get to sort through it. And there's another thing, once I've got all this stuff in little boxes and trays, buckets, bins, whatever you want to call it, I've got a system in place then, so whenever I take something out, I'll know where to put it back. But at the moment, absolutely no system whatsoever. And when it's broke, you just get more and more disorganised. So I gradually emptied most of the room, starting with the old boiler I'd been putting off getting rid of ever since moving in, and then moving on to the old shelf system built by the previous owner. And what was the solution to my storage problems? Well, you might have noticed this shelving system at the back of the cellar, which I bought a few years ago when we decided to try and get a bit more organised in the office, when we bought various shelving systems, this adjustable birch plywood workbench, fixed melamine workbenches, and this mobile packing bench. All the bins, of course, and various other things, all purchased at the time from Big Doug. I can't remember why I chose Big Doug at the time, and there are of course a lot of companies out there selling shelf and racking systems. But 4 to 5 years later, I've been really happy with the quality of the systems supplied, and there was a minor imperfection at the time on the birch plywood workbench which they replaced without hesitation, which I think says a lot. But their eagle-eyed marketing guy spotted one of their workbenches in the Silicon Corners video I did a year ago, and when I told him about the tool store reorganisation I was planning, he asked if he could help. So Big Doug have supplied me with these two shelf systems and the parts bins you see here for today's video free of charge, but they haven't paid me to do the video and have no editorial input in it whatsoever. So where do you start if you're planning a shelf or racking system for your garage or tool store? Flicking through the free catalogue or online, you'll see what is on the face of it a perplexing array of systems, but you can navigate online to the particular use you have in mind to narrow down the options, or the catalogue is particularly helpful with its shelving and racking guide, which summarises each option, breaking it down into load capacity, pricing, a heavier duty or obviously more expensive, and shelf material options. And there are also specialist systems with, for example, galvanized shelving if you're putting your shelving system into a very damp space. You'll probably want a bit more consistency or uniformity than what I've got with my 3 different systems down here. The Big 400 high quality heavy duty industrial strength racking with 18mm chipboard shelves looks after the heavy stuff, including screw boxes and paint pots. This Big 200 slightly lighter duty system, this time with galvanized beams, that we originally bought for the office, but it's happily now surplus requirements there. And the 2 cheaper value medium duty shelving systems supplied for the video by Big Doug. Slightly taller, and because I knew I was only going to be putting light things on the 6mm MDF shelves, and wanted 5 shelves rather than 3 or 4. Putting together these systems is very, very simple. One of the USPs of the Big Doug system is its boltless design. So as long as you've got a hammer or preferably a rubber assembly mallet like this as supplied by them to avoid damaging the powder coating of the system itself, and the instructions, and possibly a drill driver if you're intending to anchor the system to the wall, that's it, you're ready to go. The trick on opening the kit is to separate out the uprights, side beams, front and back beams. With the rubber feet attached, you add the side beam to the uprights to form the bottom shelf, and later adjusted this up a notch higher. The repeating this step to create a second side beam for the next shelf level. After repeating this step to create a second side frame, I inserted upright connectors into the top of the uprights so that I could later slot in the other half of each upright. It's so much easier if you've got a helper, but to be honest, as you see here, assembly by one person is very straightforward. There's a couple of clouts with the mallet, and the side frames are pretty much freestanding, even with just a single front and back beam. Then it was just a case of adding the other half of the uprights to the top of the upright connectors. Note, with the heavy duty systems, the uprights are typically in one piece for extra strength. Then I added the remaining side beams and front and back beams to create the rest of the shelves and the centre support beams, bending the tabs to 90 degrees before inserting each support beam. If you want to move or adjust them, quick tap, move it down to where you want to put it. These are 6mm MDF sheets. I'm not overly in love with the idea of using 6mm MDF. Seems a bit thin to me, but then this is the value, the sort of budget range, I suppose. And the intention was not to put massively heavy stuff on it. Now what you will find with the value range is you have to get the shelving system absolutely square in order to be able to push the 6mm shelves into position, which I've got to say is a bit fiddly, and certainly you want to do this before screwing your shelving system to the wall, because this in all probability will push it out of square. However, by far the trickiest part of the assembly on this centuries old floor was to get the shelf systems level, which I did with a bit of good old improvisation using some roof tile offcuts and my trusty glazing packers. With the value shelving in position, I could mark the wall and anchor the shelf to the wall with some 70mm screws and some 10mm deep plastic spacers I used to put up permits in the day job. It's well worth doing this because you end up with a really rigid, sturdy system that you know isn't going anywhere. In the same way as the heavy duty system has these bay connectors, the value system also has connectors that slip into place from behind to join the two shelf systems together. Assembling the heavier duty Big 200 series system was a much more straightforward exercise, as there was already a concrete plinth in place constructed some years earlier for the original boiler. But I thought I'd show you some quick clips from the assembly to show you the slightly different heavier duty design of the boltless system and the flush 15mm chipboard shelves. The hard work was done, leaving me the more fiddly task of arranging 10 years of accumulated tools into the various parts bins, which, if you're interested, are the budget plastic part bins which I've got in every size. Something I learnt from organising the office racking was to use this Dymo label machine to label each parts bin, which is the final piece in the jigsaw, creating the impression of a super organised space and, most importantly, making it very easy to quickly identify the tool or bit of ironmongery you're looking for. I particularly like these shelf bins, again as with all my others, with drop fronts for ease of access and partitions enabling me to organise those collections of screws, bolts or other parts that so often end up in a mess in a box, as you see here, or the bottom of a drawer. I was just about to post this video and I suddenly remembered I hadn't installed the twin hooks for the ladder. And handily, in the big clear out, I found some nuts and bolts. Little tip, sanding the cut edge of the bolt makes it really easy to get the nut back on. Blissful. Now, no video on my tools will be complete without bringing in this Stanley Fatmax tool chest, or the beast as I call it, and the suitcase that I keep all my power tools in, because in the day job in the past I've had to be really mobile with a lot of distance to cover. But a couple of weeks ago I couldn't have dreamt of bringing these tools down here. So now we've finally totally removed all the tools from the house. Am I worried about damp down here with these 6mm shelves? Well, to be honest, if I could have got my hands on some varnish or other sealant and give them a little coat before installing, I probably would have done, just to keep them clean and perhaps to keep the damp out. Can't say I'm that worried though, because this big 400 system with its chipboard shelves has been in here now for a few years, and the chipboard looks as good as the day I installed it. But if you are worried about damp, check out the galvanized shelving system options. So that's it for today. I really hope you found this video useful. If you're a bit of a tool organisational guru and you've got some clever ideas or tips, do let us all know in the comments section below. And as usual, details of all today's tools will be in the description below this video, which obviously you can access on your smartphone by clicking on the arrow and on your PC by clicking on the show more button. If you've liked today's video, it'd be great if you could give it the thumbs up below. And as I always say, if you're new to my channel, I would love to have you subscribe. You can do that by clicking on the link here, and don't forget to click the bell notification icon so you get notified of all future uploads. See you soon.